Hello, everyone, and welcome to this description of the Asheville Vedic Astrology Apprenticeship program. Now, this program was originally delivered as a 4-year course of study. Students participated in 3 semesters a year, and each year built upon the previous material. And then the training itself concluded with a year-long practicum. And in the practicum, students were encouraged to do 42 donation-based sessions. They had to write 3 10,000-word papers, and they also had to put together 3 individual 1-hour videos to demonstrate their ability to communicate the principles of astrology well. Now, this course takes all of that material and it condenses it down into what turns out to be a 2-year course of study. Now, how do we take 4 years and condense it into 2 years? Well, it's really very simple. Originally, when the course was offered live, as I mentioned, students would participate in 3 separate semesters. And so each semester was about 6 to 8 weeks long, and then there was around a 6 to 8 week break, and then we went to the next semester, then we had another break, and then the next semester. So each year, 3 semesters. And the reason we had breaks in between each semester was because the original way the program was presented, students had to write 2 papers per semester to demonstrate their capacity to understand the material that was being shared and how to apply it astrologically. So what we've done is we've taken all of the course material, all of the audio, all of the video, and rather than have breaks in between each semester, a new class is presented every 8 days. And so the well-motivated student can go through the course in a matter of about 2 years, but it is intense and it does take a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of energy. So please keep this in mind. Now, how was this course developed? I had been an astrologer for around 15 years before I began working on the curriculum of this course. And in college, I studied theories of learning, I studied psychology, and I really wanted to find a way to teach students to learn astrology so that they understood astrology. And that might seem silly. You might think, well, all teachers should be doing that. But what I had observed was that oftentimes students were learning from books. They were learning on their own, which is perfectly valid. And they would occasionally attend a conference, or sometimes they might gain access to a large collection of lectures. And what they tended to do was jump around from one fundamental of astrology to another. And they never really learned how to put the puzzle pieces together. And so I began studying more intently Brihat Parashara, Horashastra, Sarvarta Chintamani, Yavana Jataka, and Jaimini Sutras. And I noticed that there was a very specific progression, a very specific pattern of topics and themes that were taught within these old texts. And so I began putting together classes in such a way that we really are following, in a sense, the pattern more so of Brihat Parashara Horashastra. And what I noticed was when students studied following that pattern, they tended to grasp astrological principles with greater clarity, and they tended to be less confused, and they tended to know how to apply various astrological principles to get more accurate and precise information. So anyway, I observed all of this, and I began putting this program together, this course together. And so it starts with the fundamentals. It starts with the very basics. Now, over the years, I've had quite a few people write to me and say, I'd love to take your course, but I've been studying astrology for 20 years now, so I know what's going on. And of course, I think, well, if you've been studying for 20 years and you know what's going on, you don't really need to participate in this program. But anyway, we keep talking, and they ask, can I jump ahead? Can I just get full access to the course and study what I want? And I understand why they're asking. However, my answer is always no, because even if you have studied a lot of astrology in the past, There's nothing wrong with starting at the beginning and reaffirming the fundamentals of the principles of astrology. And I've had quite a few students who we had this conversation, and I said, no, you've got to start at the beginning like everyone else. And they were a little upset about that. But at the end, when they finally made it to the end of the course, they absolutely understood why I prefer that you start at the beginning and go all the way through, because they saw that their typical, how they were learning in the past was a little bit haphazard. It was more of a shotgun approach. And when you look at astrology, when you look at texts like Brihat Parashar Hora Shastra, there's a reason that certain principles are presented first. Because once you grasp those what you might consider to be introductory principles, which really make the whole thing work, once you grasp those, then you're able to plug them in to a particular technique. And once you have that technique, then you can see how that technique fits into the larger equation of figuring out timing, figuring out how a person's psychology is going to function. And so when I look at astrology and when I teach astrology, I look at it as though we're putting together a puzzle. And you've got the puzzle before you. You know generally what it's supposed to look like, but we have to study each piece of the puzzle first on its own. And while we want to jump ahead and make predictions and help people with this ancient knowledge, once you know what the puzzle pieces look like, then you can actually put them together in such a way that you're not guessing, that you don't have to use intuition. And so the whole purpose of this course is to encourage a very methodical way of understanding astrology. And it builds such that when you move from the Rashis and signs to the Bhavas, to the planets, then to Shadbala and into how Rahu and Ketu work and the yogas and so on, all of that builds upon itself so that as much as is possible in our current era, the guesswork of astrology, it's not there anymore. You know how to apply it. And if you do it repeatedly, you will get good results. And this is one of the most rewarding parts about this program, is that people who've made it to the end of the program, it's wonderful to be able to give those students a chart and to say, tell me about this chart. And 80 to 90% of the time, each student will come to the same conclusion because they have learned how to put together the puzzle pieces of astrology. And that's a really wonderful thing. So if we ever want to become engaged in more research of astrology, it is helpful to have sort of a repeatable process. And that's what this whole course is about. Now, we have to remember that this is a self-paced course, which means you are studying for yourself. That these classes that you will see, they were live at one time. And so it might be that in the video, I say things like, those were wonderful questions that you had, or I'm looking forward to reading your homework. Don't be confused. Keep in mind, these were pre-recorded. So don't write to me and say, well, what was this homework? You know, when did we have this discussion? We didn't. It was once live and now it's pre-recorded. It is also a subscription course. That means that you maintain access to the course for the duration of your subscription. And this is important. And this is why you'll hear me in the videos often say, take good notes. And when this course was originally offered live, students didn't have unlimited access to the videos. We went through a semester. They had 2 more weeks after the semester was over to review the previous videos. And then those videos were not available to them anymore. And again, because maybe you've noticed that you've signed up for different subscriptions or you've signed up for other classes and you have lifetime access to them. And then you think, well, I'll get around to it. So you never actually really deeply pay attention. So the purpose of only giving access while you have a subscription is so that you pay attention. You take it seriously. You make it a very important part of your day to study this material. And many of the students who've completed this, they end up with a notebook full of principles, notes, techniques, all in order. And what they're able to do with that is turn it into a manual themselves, a book for themselves that they can use as a reference. So this is a subscription course, and you maintain access so long as you maintain your subscription. Now, sometimes this has happened. People need to pause their subscription because life gets in the way, or they don't have time, or they need to catch up on what they've been learning because there's a lot of material shared. Well, the great thing about this program is that if you need to pause the subscription, you can. And then when you come back, as long as you use the same email, login information, login credentials, you're able to start right where you left off. So you don't have to start over again. As long as you maintain your login credentials, you remember them. That's important. Now, why is it good to participate in this program? The reason I put this program together was to give a repeatable, accurate, and methodical way of practicing astrology well. I value intuition, and I value more of the metaphysical part of astrology. But since we're all human beings, you may be aware that sometimes your intuition doesn't always work, or sometimes it's a little off. And when you approach astrology in the way that this program teaches it, it doesn't matter if your intuition is working or not. You're able to go through the methods. You're able to study the chart in such a fashion that as long as you just look at the data, you're going to have the right information in front of you, at least the best information available currently in our era as it is. So my goal is to provide a methodology and approach that is repeatable, that makes sense, that puts the puzzle pieces of astrology together. And this is a hard course, and only 10% of the people who begin it actually complete the course. So keep that in mind. But those individuals, the 10% that have completed this program, those are the astrologers that I personally refer people to. Because at this time, I am retired from doing astrological sessions. A little bit of backstory about that. I've been an astrologer for a very long time, but I am also a Kriya Yoga teacher. And my main focus was always on Kriya Yoga, but my Kriya Yoga guru, my teacher, would always encourage me to continue practicing astrology because he said that was a noble vocation, and that would allow me to pay my mortgage and buy groceries. That way I was able to teach Kriya Yoga on a donation basis, as he always did. And that went on for a very long time. And then after about 18 years, changes had occurred in my life, situations had changed, and I felt a very strong calling to devote my attention more fully to teaching Kriya Yoga and yogic meditation. And so I spoke with my Kriya Yoga guru, and I told him this. And he looked at me, and rather than saying what he usually did, which was, why don't you keep doing astrology, because that will help you to pay your bills and be of service to the world, good service to the world. He said, I think that's a good idea. I mean, when I said to him, I believe it's time for me to focus solely on teaching Kriya Yoga, he just said, I think that's a good idea. And then he passed six weeks after that. So that's when I shifted, and I made this program, as you are experiencing it now, as a self-paced program. And if it makes any difference to you, this program does help to support my Kriya Yoga teaching ministry. So this is one way that I still maintain income so that I am able to travel and I am able to focus on teaching Kriya Yoga to the best of my ability. Now, what is the curriculum like for this program? Let's see if I can share a screen with you. Okay, so the curriculum, there are three main sections. Section 1, we go through the Rashis and signs. It's 21 hours worth of material. Then we look at the Bhavas and houses, which is 17.5. The Grahas and planets, which is 17.5. That's section 1. And this was originally what students studied in year 1 when it was given live. The next section which would be technically year 2. Planetary strength and mathematical influences, 21 hours. And that is gaining a deep understanding of Shadbala. And this is important because oftentimes we just look at Shadbala as a graph or an end result of a collection of numbers, when really Shadbala itself, you can do a whole session just on looking at a person's Shadbala, because the different strengths that are included in Shadbala tell you something important about the individual. So that's why we spend a lot of time on Shadbala. Then introduction to planetary relationships and states. These are the Avashtas, the Lajatati Avashtas, and so on. Also very important, 21 hours. And then finally, planetary combinations and mathematical yogas. So this is looking at yogas, but this is taking it from the more general concepts of yogas, where people say, you have this special yoga and therefore this is going to happen. Or, oh my, you have this Kimadruma yoga, these terrible things are going to happen to you. Well, those are great sort of thumb rules, and they really help people who are relying more on intuition. But in Brihad Parashar Hora Shastra, there are ways of qualifying yogas, which means now you can see, oh, they have great yogas, they have bad yogas. Well, which one actually has enough strength that they're going to feel it? Because just because you have a yoga doesn't mean you're going to feel it, which is why you might have had people tell you you have certain yogas, and yet you don't have the experience of that. So we spend 16 hours going over the mathematical ways of calculating yogas to see, are they going to give their results? Are you actually going to experience them in your life? Section 3, the power of Rahu and Ketu. Now, many people wonder, why do we wait until section 3, or what would have been year 3, to get into Rahu and Ketu? Well, it's true that you can see a lot about a person through the general positions of Rahu and Ketu. However, as you'll learn when you take this part of the class or this program, that Rahu and Ketu are shadow planets, which means they don't work on their own. They have to work through the sign they're in. They have to work through the Rashi they're in. They have to work through the house they're in. They have to work through the planet they're in. And these planets are subject to Shadbala. These planets are subject to the Avashtas. These planets are subject to the effects of yogas. And these are all happening in a bhava and in a Rashi. So in order to accurately understand Rahu and Ketu, you have to know all of this previous material in detail. Otherwise, you're really just getting general information about Rahu and Ketu. So you can't really talk about Rahu and Ketu until you really understand what comes before that. What is Rahu and Ketu working through? The Rashi, the Bhava, the planet, and so on. And then we look at the applications of the Vargas. Now, this is another area which is very interesting, because many people treat the Vargas as though they are individual charts. Like you could just take one out and look at it by itself. Well, that's not the case. That's a very convenient way of looking at it because it helps us make sense of what's going on there. But the Vargas are just harmonics or fractals of the Rashi chart, the main chart. And so in order to understand what's going on in the Vargas, the same thing applies here. One has to have a deep understanding of these previous of this previous course material. And then we can look at timing, dashas, and transits, because before you can tell someone when something's going to happen, you have to actually know what's going to happen. So this is section 3. Now, the great thing about this self-paced version of the course is that we have a lot of extra material in here. And what do I mean by that? Well, as I said, the students at the beginning of the program, when it was given live, they had these 3 semesters per year for 3 years, and they did their practicum. Well, just to kind of round out this whole program, what I have included in this self-paced version are bonus lessons. So, for example, once you finish the Rashi and sign section, well, now you have access to a course dealing specifically with the Atmakaraka and relationships. Once you finish the Bhava and houses, that class, well, now you have access to a bonus class on planetary strengths, weaknesses, qualities, and energies. After the Grahas and planets, then we look at the myth and magic course. There is a prajna course in here, an additional course looking at cusps, rashis, dashas, and transits. So after each section, I believe after every section, might not be every section, but just about, I have included additional material. And some of that can be quite lengthy in itself. So this whole program is intense. It's packed full of what I feel is most essential to understand astrology well. And the goal with all of this is to teach you to think like an astrologer, to teach you to think like an astrologer. And the reason I make that statement is because there's a lot more to astrology than what is in this 2-year program. If I would have spent the time to go through everything, this could have easily been a 10-year course of study. However, I like to be efficient. And what I have found is once a student has these fundamentals, then they can go on and read texts on their own. They can learn about prajna. They can learn about varshapal. They can learn about the nakshatras. They can learn about compatibility. It's very easy for them because they have the baseline information. It'd be very similar to going to school to study music, and you have the fundamental information you need. And once you graduate, well, now you can learn quite a bit on your own. So once you complete all the material that is available here, you will be able to have the discernment and the capacity, in my opinion, to learn anything you want about astrology. So this is a pretty intensive curriculum, but do keep in mind that it does not cover everything. It covers what I have found works most often, most of the time. Okay, now the main texts for this course are The Art and Science of Vedic Astrology, Volumes 1 and Volume 2. These were books that were, the first book particularly co-authored with myself and one of my astrological teachers, Richard Fish. And the second book really looks into the Avashtas, Lajatati Avashtas, Bhava Yogas, and so on. And so the main text to study for this include The Art and Science of Vedic Astrology, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Now, as I mentioned, the source material for the program is Brihat Parashar Hora Shastra, Yavana Jataka, Jaimini Sutras, and Sarvarta Chintamani. So you may have studied other texts, but this is what we're pulling from mainly. What is the time commitment that is often required for this course? It's good for you to know that because, as I've mentioned, some people have gotten into the course and they've realized that there's a lot more to it than they expected. So I polled students who have gone through the course, and while each course itself lasts about 6 to 8 weeks in length, the lectures usually last about 2 to 3 hours per week. And again, after polling students, what they said was they generally spent a minimum of 2 additional hours per week in note-taking, writing, and reading. And some have said that they spent an additional 6 to 8 hours a week. So all of you are going to learn and study on a different rate, a different schedule, but this is the general feedback that I got from students. Again, can you jump ahead even if you've already been studying astrology? No, you can't. And I think if you go through the course far enough, you will understand why. Is it possible to gain a certificate from the program? Now, you've probably heard me say this before, and I'm not really a fan of this idea of certificates, particularly in the realm of astrology. Why? Because there really isn't an actual governing board of astrology. There are different organizations that have popped up that have taken it upon themselves to try to systematize astrology, I suppose. But there's no astrological police running around making sure that you have a certificate. And many of the best astrologers I know have just studied well, learned from trial and error, and had a great capacity for devotion towards the subject. And they become very sincere, good, and helpful astrologers. And I've known plenty of people who have taken all the classes, they've checked off all the boxes, and someone gave them a certificate, and they really weren't that good. So as far as certificates go, the certificate is only as good as the program or the teachers. So that being said, since this is a self-paced program, there is no official certificate through this avenue, meaning you're just getting the subscription, you're studying on your own, you're applying what you learn, you're becoming a good astrologer on your own. You're just learning for yourself, and hopefully you'll be able to be of benefit to the people that you serve. But we do have a previous student from the program who took it upon herself to essentially undertake what I would do with students, where I would read all of their papers that they would submit for each semester. I would make comments. I would work with them to make sure they understood what was going on. I would check their homework. And this student also helps people go through the practicum part of the program. And that would be after you complete all of your study, all of your training. Well, now you actually want to kind of get engaged in the practicum like the original program did. Well, you will be able to work with her or other tutors of this course to have your 10,000 word papers reviewed, to have your videos assessed, and to have the feedback forms from your 42 donation sessions approved. And then if you go through all of that and you do it well, she submits your name to me. I actually create a certificate for you and I send it to you. And then I will put your name and your bio on the Asheville Vedic Astrology Apprenticeship program. Now, I'm happy to do this because I know this is a hard course. And as I mentioned, only 10% of people who start actually get to the end. So if you make it to the end, and if you succeed in all of these things, I personally feel you're going to be a very good astrologer. And other people have proven that to be true too. So keep this in mind when you think about certificates. There's no governing body. Certificates are just as good as the teacher or the program. If you want to learn this material on your own, by all means, just stay subscribed, study hard, apply it, see how it works, and you'll become a really good astrologer. But if you want to participate in the bigger astrological community, well then, you can look at the curriculum. In the very first section of the curriculum, there should be another tab you can click on that says New Certificate Option. And you can find out ways to work with our tutors to become involved in that. And that is separate. That is separate. So you're still going to have to pay the tutors for their time, for their assessments, and so on. However, we did calculate out the cost of taking the subscription service as well as working with a tutor and compared it to what the original apprenticeship students went through. And the cost is actually almost the same. So it works out. Now, what kind of help is available? As I mentioned, you can find tutors who are individuals who've already gone through this program and succeeded. Are there opportunities for future training? That's up in the air at the moment. I have ideas for more advanced study. However, every time I go back and I look at this course material, I have a strong feeling that this is enough. So at this time, while there is a possibility for future training, if you make it clear through this program, you're already going to be head and shoulders above most astrologers that I've ever known. And so then you can take other people's classes and other people's courses, and you'll have the discernment to know what's going to work and what's not, and you'll become a much better astrologer. So ultimately, remember that the entire point of this course, if you are meant to be a professional counselor, astrological counselor, the purpose of this course is to give you the best training you can get, the most methodical and accurate and precise training that you can get. Astrology is also a really wonderful way of understanding life from a spiritual perspective, gaining a greater sense of appreciation for the wholeness of life, for the oneness of life, a greater sense of even spiritual philosophy. And so if you're studying it for that reason, that's a wonderful reason to do it. If you want to contribute to the astrological community, the purpose of this course is to give you the way of thinking like an astrologer, such that you can speak clearly to your clients or to your own students, or to anyone really, so that people gain the greatest benefit from this ancient science. So that's really what this is all about. And I'm very happy for your interest in the program. And I'd love to encourage you to just begin your studies and see how it goes. You never know, you might get sucked in. That happens with a lot of people. And also keep in mind that this is one way that helps to fund my Kriya Yoga teaching ministry. So teaching meditation, yogic philosophy to others. I do my best, like my Kriya Yoga teacher did, to share Kriya Yoga on a donation basis to anyone who's sincerely interested in learning it. Every now and then when I work with certain organizations, I have to charge a fee, but it is my goal to make Kriya Yoga as available to those who are sincerely interested in waking up spiritually, allowing them to have that opportunity, because that's what I had. So I wanted to keep this program going because I think it's a good program, but also as a way to support, as I said, this Kriya Yoga teaching ministry. So I hope you enjoy your journey astrologically. I appreciate your support, and I look forward to seeing what you're able to contribute to this world after you complete your studies.